Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm John Dickerson. President Obama has put the brakes on his Afghanistan review. After weeks of meetings, he's told his military advisors to return to the drawing board. He wants a clearer exit strategy, and he continues to have strong misgivings about the government in Afghanistan. Joining me to discuss the latest turn is former U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan, Ronald Neumann, currently the head of the American Academy of Diplomacy, and the Washington Post's Karen DeYoung. Ambassador, I want to start with you. The president has said Hamid Karzai needs to stop the corruption, improve things. But what if he doesn't?
Well, I think Karzai wants to. I think this is very tough in the Afghan context. I believe we can use leverage, but I think we need to recognize this is a process. This is not going to be a single decision. In fact, most decisions will sound good and not mean a lot. And we're going to have to work this over time. And at some point, we need to rebuild a common view that we're in this together. Right now, it sounds to many Afghans as though we're trying to undercut President Karzai. That puts everybody in defensive crouch. You know, shouting at your spouse doesn't usually help win the argument. So I think we need to bring down the decibel level. We will need to use pressure, but probably a little more quietly, and recognize that there are going to be dozens, maybe hundreds of decisions over time that we have to work on.
Karen, I wanted to turn to you to walk us through exactly what the president did here and where his head is and what he's asked of the Pentagon.
Well, I'm not sure he's totally put the brakes on it. The Pentagon has given the president a series of options, each of which calls for a kind of escalating number of troops. I think what one of the things the president has done is to say, look, this is a civil-military strategy. We need to know more about the civil part. We need to know more about governance and what our relationship is with Karzai and what we're doing on the ground beyond the military offensives and how those two things play together. But I think one of the problems is that the United States really doesn't have a lot of leverage against Karzai. Karzai has his own political imperatives at home, and I think he's probably rightly guessed that President Obama's decision will be based on what the White House thinks is the best thing for U.S. policy, and that is not likely going to be, we don't like Karzai, we don't think he's going fast enough or in the right direction, so we are therefore going to leave.
But the president's had these meetings for quite some time. This is a kind of a first principles question, this idea of the partnership between the Afghan government and the United States. And so he's not discovering this question, in other words. So is it that he wasn't getting what he wanted from the Pentagon? They weren't, I mean, it seems a little late in the game, I guess, to be at this point. Well,
he did get this intervention over the past few days from Ambassador Eikenberry in Kabul saying, look, I don't think that the civil part of this is where it needs to be. I think it's under-resourced. I think we need to, this is one way that we can put pressure on Karzai, is not to make a decision not to go forward, but to just do it a little bit more slowly. And also the president, I think, has a little bit of time now. He's leaving today to go to Asia on an 8-day trip, and that gives some time for people back here to come up with at least some refinements, if not totally different options.
Let me ask you, Ambassador, about that pressure. Okay, how do you read this move now, and is it likely to put the kind of pressure on Karzai that's likely to make him to behave in a way the president would like?
It may. It depends. First of all, are we asking for something he can reasonably deliver? Are we using this for a short-term purpose, say some key figures in the cabinet, announcements that could come fairly soon after his inauguration next week, Karzai's inauguration next week? Or what is it we're asking for? It's a very heavy tactic which can work for a limited goal that's very time-defined. It's not a very effective tactic if you're trying to get long-term progress. And Karen made a very good point about, are we going to shoot ourselves in the head? But I think we need to understand Karzai is going to have to deal with some political debt paying. After all, if you noticed our ambassadors around here, we pay political debts in our own system. hopefully to high-quality people. But the fact is, we need to make sure we don't have poor performers in key jobs, but we also need to leave Karzai some space to deal with domestic politics. And we need to have an ongoing dialogue and an understanding that we're trying to balance these things together with him.
You are very familiar with the kind of cables that the current ambassador sent. Explain that process and whether, and those cables and the role they would play here. It seems to have played a big role in the president's thinking. How do you read?
Well, that's what the leak construes. I don't know. You know, the ship of state is the only vessel that leaks from the top, so it's sometimes difficult to know exactly what has been proposed. But a formal telegram or cable in diplomatic parlance is the vehicle for laying out an official viewpoint. That doesn't mean that the ambassador won't be using a secure telephone and classified emails, various other things, but it is the vehicle that is the most broadly distributed to lay out a coherent view. But whether it was initiated, you know, in response to request, without knowing those things, I can't say. And since I suspect that the cable is a good deal longer than the 2 sentences about its content that have appeared in the press, I don't know what else is in it.
Karen, what's your sense of how big a lift this is? If the president's asked for new information, he's, as you pointed out, going away for a while. How much time will it take the Pentagon to give him the kind of answers he wants?
I don't think it would take very much time. I think that, just going back for a minute to Ambassador Eikenberry, you know, this is a theme that he started on very shortly after he arrived there earlier this year. He had asked in the summer for more resources, more people, more money on the civilian side. He didn't get it. I think he's coming back now and saying, look, you know, this has got to be part of the mix. And it's not only the cable, as Ambassador Neumann said. Ambassador Eikenberry was present in the meeting yesterday, the high-level national security meeting at the White House, on a video hookup, and so I'm sure that part of that meeting was devoted to a deeper explanation by him that led to the president to say, well, wait a minute, let's make sure that we're fully examining this aspect of this. And again, I think he felt like he had a little bit of time, and that's something that the Pentagon, you know, there are hundreds of offices and thousands of people to work on this, and they I think have what they need readily at hand.
In your sense, because Stanley McChrystal, General McChrystal, often talks about it, and in his report he talked about the civilian side, and so it's not that the military was clueless on this front. So do you sense that Eikenberry and McChrystal are at odds here, or is this a refinement? I guess I'm still trying to figure out exactly the sides here and how at odds they are.
I don't really know the answer to that on a personal level between them. I mean, one hears stories about some friction there. As you know, Eikenberry used to be the U.S. military commander in Afghanistan. But I think part of it is institutional and a situation that has existed for a long time, and certainly that we saw in Iraq, where it's just very difficult to have this very large institution, the Pentagon, where people get ordered to do things, where the numbers simply dwarf the civilian side of it, the numbers of people, the amount of money. And so however much you want to have a balanced policy with a serious civilian component, you're always going to have the temptation and the need to turn to the military to do things that in the best of all possible worlds you would like the civilians to do. And I think that that's what they're finding here.
Ambassador, the final question is to you, which is the president's critics talk about delay. Vice President Cheney used the word dithering. In your experience, this rather small delay in the process here, is it a big deal, small deal, and how is it viewed in Afghanistan, do you think?
I think the process as a whole has sent a message of some weakness. It scares people, Afghans, Pakistanis, is the United States on the way out. But we've already paid that price. So if one takes another week or two to refine this, and it's a process that probably is necessary for our national consensus, I don't think that has an additional price. I think the question then is, what is the decision? If it is something close to General McChrystal's, then you're showing leadership, determination as far as Afghans are concerned. If the decision after all of this is a large step down from McChrystal's ask, then that will be seen in the region as our first step out the door. And that will undercut things we want, because Afghans will start thinking about survival strategies if the foreigners are leaving and the war is lost. And so the price of our long debate is essentially, I think, ruling out most lesser strategies as practical alternatives. I don't say that with pleasure. I just think that's a price. And on the civilian side, asking the military to do things is one thing. Resourcing it is another. We've missed this boat before. There were places we tried to work, money we asked for in the past to work in provinces that were not at threat. We didn't get it. The threats have rolled on, and so we should not repeat that mistake of the past.
All right, Ambassador Ronald Neumann, thanks very much. Also the author of The Other War, about his time in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Just out.
Just out. Karen DeYoung of The Washington Post, thanks very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Turning now to celebrity and politics, what happens when Hollywood gets involved in politics? A new documentary, Pollywood, now airing on Showtime, tries to deal with that question and the sometimes negative perception of celebrities and their political opinions. To discuss the film is its producer and co-president of the Creative Coalition, actor Tim Daly. Tim, welcome. I want to ask you about the main message of this film, of this documentary. What will people get from it when they watch it?
Well, I don't think that there is, really a central thesis. I think that it's sort of a snapshot of where we're at in terms of, our political process and how media and celebrity and politics all collide, and how difficult it is now because of the speed of the information that we get to ferret out the truth when so much of what we see is essentially entertainment.
And when you make that case, are you talking mostly about what we see, say, on cable news, or do you mean just basically across all platforms in terms of that blending of news and entertainment?
Well, I think that the film focuses more specifically on television and how television has impacted the way we see politicians and how we develop our opinions about them. It doesn't really examine, the internet and Twitter and, the history of print journalism. It really focuses more on, this invention of television, and how, like most inventions, it has a good side and a bad side.
What's your sense of the good side? Most people these days say that it only has the bad side, the sound bites, the too much attention on attractiveness and not on substance. If you had to make the case for the good side of television, what is it?
Well, certainly, I work in television a lot, and, human beings have a persistent need to be told stories. We love telling stories to each other, so television can be tremendously entertaining. I also think that, if you are willing to spend the time and search television, you can find a lot of not only fantastic entertainment programming, but a lot of informational programming that is, astute and worthwhile. One of the points the film makes is that when there was a point in time when, the news media figured out that they could actually make money in the news arena rather than just presenting news as a public service. And when that happened, it changed the nature of how we get news. We're certainly seeing that now. I don't want to name names, but you can see how it's becoming, I think, more in an odd way like the yellow journalism at the beginning of the 20th century or the end of the 19th century, when big, people like William Randolph Hearst owned newspapers and told them exactly what to print. Certainly the news hasn't always been unbiased. We attempted to do that at a certain point, and we're moving away from it now.
The film also talks about Hollywood celebrities and their role in the political process. There is this view that it's all liberals in Hollywood that are involved. Is that a mistaken view?
Well, it's completely mistaken. I mean, the thing is that, you know, I pointed out at one point, I don't think this made it in the film, but Republicans are the ones that elect actors to public office. Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronald Reagan, you know, was a big hero of the Republicans, Sonny Bono. So to, you know, paint Hollywood liberals as the only people involved is just, you know, patently false.
All right, Tim Daly, thanks very much for joining us. The film is Pollywood. Thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. You can find us here each day on CBSNews.com at 12:30 p.m. I'm John Dickerson. Have a great day.